Marcus Reed stood beneath the flickering streetlight like he was waiting for permission to exist. The sidewalk outside the precinct smelled of rain and old concrete. Across the street, patrol cars idled, engines humming low, red and blue lights muted but restless. Marcus kept his hand visible, fingers loosely clasped around a plain black notebook. He wasn't filming. He wasn't speaking. He was simply watching. That seemed to be the problem. Boots scraped asphalt. A shadow cut across his line of sight. "You lost?" the officer asked, voice casual in the way a blade looks dull until it cuts. Marcus lifted his eyes slowly. He noted the badge number without moving his head. The tight jaw. The smirk that said this wasn't a question. "I'm observing," Marcus replied evenly. The officer laughed once, sharp and performative. "Observing what? You casing the building?" Because people who stand around police stations usually have a reason, and it's never a good one. A cruiser door slammed behind them. Someone nearby turned their head, then quickly turned away. Marcus felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, the old instinct to shrink, to soothe. He didn't. He stayed still. He breathed. The officer stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You know what happens to guys who make cops nervous?" That was a line. Quiet. Almost gentle, meant only for him. Marcus slid the notebook into his coat pocket, thumb brushing the embossed seal inside. Not yet. Too soon. Across the street, a security camera clicked, adjusting focus. The officer reached for his radio, and Marcus realized, with sudden, chilling clarity, that this encounter was about to become a test no one here knew they were taking. Marcus Reed did not move when the officer stopped in front of him. Rainwater slid from the brim of the officer's cap, tapping the pavement between them. The streetlight hummed overhead, its glow bleaching the color from everything it touched. Marcus kept his hands visible, fingers relaxed, posture neutral. He knew the rules better than most. He also knew how quickly rules bend. "You can't loiter here," the officer said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "This is a public sidewalk." The officer's mouth twitched. "Not at midnight. Not outside a police precinct. You got ID?" Marcus reached slowly into his coat and produced his wallet. He handed it over without comment. The officer studied the card longer than necessary, eyes narrowing at Marcus's name, his address, the calm printed facts of his life. "What do you do, Marcus Reed?" the officer asked. "I work for the city." A pause. "Doing what?" Marcus met his gaze. "Compliance." The word hung there, useless and dangerous at the same time. The officer handed the ID back, thumb lingering like he might drop it just to watch Marcus react. "You've been standing here a while," the officer said. "Watching us." "I've been observing foot traffic." "Uh-huh." The officer leaned closer. "You writing things down?" Marcus shook his head once. "No." "You nervous?" "No." The officer smiled, thin and humorless. "You should be." Behind him, another patrol car rolled past slowly. No one intervened. No one asked if everything was fine. Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his shoulders, the instinct to perform harmlessness, to apologize for existing. He pushed it down. "I'm not breaking any laws," Marcus said. The officer's radio crackled. He didn't answer it. "Funny thing," he said quietly. "Neither am I." Silence stretched. Rain softened. The city seemed to hold its breath. "What's your badge number?" Marcus asked. The officer blinked, surprised. "Excuse me." "I'd like your badge number." The officer laughed, loud enough for the cameras. "Look at you, getting brave." Marcus didn't respond. He counted heartbeats instead. 1, 2, 3. The officer took a step back, eyes cold now. "You know what I see? A guy who doesn't know when to move along." "And I see an officer whose conduct is being recorded," Marcus said carefully. "By who?" the officer snapped, glancing around. Marcus tapped his temple once. "By me." The officer stared at him. Something shifted, uncertainty, quickly buried under arrogance. "You threatening me?" "No, because that's how threats start." A door across the street opened. Voices drifted out. Laughter. Normal life continuing. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Am I being detained?" The officer hesitated. Just a fraction. No. Then I'll continue standing here. Another beat. The officer's jaw tightened. He leaned in one last time. Careful, Marcus. People who watch cops too closely usually regret it. Marcus held his gaze. Noted. The officer stepped away, muttering into his radio as he went. Marcus remained under the streetlight, pulse loud in his ears, notebook heavy in his pocket. He didn't take it out. Not yet. Across the street, the security camera clicked again. Marcus finally moved, just enough to look directly into the lens. Marcus Reed closed his apartment door with his foot and locked it twice before turning on the lights. The silence inside felt earned. Outside, the city kept moving. Sirens threading the night, distant laughter, the thump of bass from a passing car. Marcus set his coat on the chair and finally pulled a notebook from his pocket. The black cover was unmarked, ordinary by design. Inside, the seal of the Office of Internal Review pressed faintly against the first page, invisible unless you knew to look. He sat at the small kitchen table and opened it. Time, location, officer description, badge number, Crowley, Daniel. Behavior, intimidation, unlawful stop, coded threats. Witnesses, present, unwilling. Marcus wrote in tight, economical lines. No adjectives that couldn't be defended. No emotions. Emotion came later, at home, when the work was done. His phone buzzed. Unknown caller. He let it ring out. Marcus opened his laptop and logged into the encrypted system. The screen glowed pale blue, sterile. He typed Crowley's name into the search bar and waited. The file loaded slowly, as if reluctant. 6 complaints in 8 years. Unprofessional conduct. Excessive stops. Verbal harassment. 1 allegation of retaliation after civilian asked for a badge number. Each case closed the same way. Insufficient evidence. Officer denied misconduct. No body cam footage available. Marcus leaned back and rubbed his eyes. He clicked through the narratives. Different neighborhoods. Same language. Officer felt threatened. Subject was uncooperative. No witnesses willing to corroborate. Patterns didn't announce themselves. They whispered. His phone buzzed again. A text this time. Supervisor Alvarez. You were outside Central tonight? Marcus stared at the message. He typed back. Yes. Routine observation. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. Be careful. The reply came. That precinct has history. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. I know, he said to the empty room. He scrolled further. 1 complaint caught his attention, filed 3 years earlier by a school teacher named Lionel Brooks. Marcus opened it. Transcript excerpt loaded automatically. Brooks, he kept asking what I was really doing in my own neighborhood. When I asked why I was being stopped, he said I had an attitude problem. Investigator, did Officer Crowley use any slurs? Brooks, no. Just his tone. The way he smiled. Case closed. No further action. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. A knock sounded at the door. Marcus froze. He glanced at the clock. 1:17 a.m. Another knock. Firmer. Marcus Reed. A male voice called. Police. He stood slowly and approached the door, careful to keep his breathing steady. He didn't open it yet. Yes. We just need to ask you a few questions. About what? A pause. Someone reported suspicious behavior earlier tonight. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. Crowley hadn't wasted time. I'm not answering questions without counsel, Marcus said calmly. Am I being detained? No. The voice said, irritation seeping through. We just want to clear something up. Then I'm declining. Silence. Then, quieter. You know this makes you look bad, right? Marcus leaned his forehead briefly against the door. Good night, officer. Footsteps retreated. A car door slammed. An engine started. Marcus stayed where he was long after the sound faded. Back at the table, he added a new line to his notes. Retaliatory contact within 4 hours of observation. He hesitated, then opened a separate folder. Protected, higher clearance. He began drafting a preliminary memo. Not an accusation. A concern. Language mattered. Precision mattered. He typed until his fingers ached. When he finally shut the laptop, dawn was starting to thin the darkness outside his window. Marcus stared at the pale light and felt the weight of the work ahead settle onto his shoulders. Crowley wasn't the anomaly. He was the example. Marcus picked up his phone and sent one last message. Alvarez, I'm escalating this. Quietly, the reply came almost immediately. I figured you would. Marcus allowed himself a single, tired breath. Then he stood, put the notebook back into his coat, and prepared to go back out into the city that pretended not to see. Marcus Reed arrived at the Office of Internal Review early the next morning, the city still clinging to fog and streetlight. He wore a plain gray jacket, no tie, carrying only his notebook and a laptop bag. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was quiet, the hum of machinery and soft beeps of access cards filling the space. He swiped his ID and entered the secure wing. Rows of desks glowed under harsh fluorescent lights, each occupied by analysts, investigators, and clerks. Marcus nodded to a few colleagues, careful to avoid eye contact with anyone who might be a conduit for information to the precinct. This was his world, a delicate chessboard of trust, deception, and bureaucracy. He set his bag down and opened his laptop. His notes from the previous night were already typed, organized by date, by badge number, by incident type. Marcus began drafting the preliminary report, a concise, factual account of Crowley's latest harassment, cross-referenced with historical complaints. Every detail mattered. Every phrase had to withstand scrutiny. An hour later, he hit submit and watched the document disappear into the secure server. Confirmation. Report submitted successfully. Tracking ID 0084712. Marcus leaned back and exhaled. It was never this easy. Not for long. By mid-afternoon, a junior analyst tapped at his shoulder. Marcus, your report about Crowley. It's gone. Not in the system. Did you save a local copy? Marcus frowned. I did, but that shouldn't matter. The server. The analyst shook his head. Checked everything. Tracking ID doesn't exist anymore. And IT said there's no record of a submission. Marcus pressed his lips together. He knew the drill. Internal review wasn't supposed to disappear reports, not officially. But old habits lingered, and people in the precinct had ways of erasing inconvenient truths. He closed his laptop. Who else has access to the server logs? The analyst shrugged. A few senior staff. But you know, those logs are tightly controlled. Marcus nodded, tightened his jaw. Then I'll go up the chain. Quietly. Later, in a private office, he spoke with Supervisor Alvarez. Marcus laid out the facts without embellishment. Report submitted. Tracking ID assigned. Report now vanished. Crowley harassment is ongoing. Retaliatory contact confirmed. No witnesses willing to testify in person yet. Alvarez leaned back in his chair, hands steepled. I'm aware. The department has history. Marcus's brow furrowed. I need this documented. Officially, or the pattern never existed. Alvarez's eyes softened, briefly, like someone holding a secret too large for their own comfort. You're pushing the boundaries, Marcus. Internal review investigators don't last long when they push too hard. You know that. I know, Marcus said, voice tight, but I'm not stopping. Alvarez hesitated. Just be careful. Crowley is sensitive. People notice when you poke at him. Marcus nodded. It wasn't advice, it was a warning. Alvarez opened a drawer and handed him a plain envelope. Some files. Historical complaints. Backup copies. Just keep it secure. Marcus took it without a word. Every complaint, every notation, every erased report. It was all part of a story the department didn't want told. A story that would eventually be unavoidable. Back at his apartment, he sifted through the contents. PDF after PDF. Transcripts of interviews. Email chains. Anonymous tip sheets. All the echoes of victims silenced or ignored. He thought of Crowley's face under the streetlight. The laugh that had cut through the night. The radio call that had followed him home. That same officer, years of complaints, and no accountability. Marcus leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a grim thought. The department can erase reports, but it cannot erase patterns. He pulled out his notebook, making a single, meticulous note. All submissions verified, all previous complaints archived locally. Systemic suppression confirmed. Escalation required. No shortcuts. For the first time that day, Marcus allowed his shoulders to relax slightly. Not victory, not even progress, but a sense of purpose sharpened. He closed his eyes, imagining the next move, the next observation, the next step in a chain that would not break. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. Minutes later, another buzz. The city beyond his window still carried on, unaware. Marcus picked up his notebook, pen in hand. Patterns were coming into focus, and he would not look away. The city was gray and damp when Marcus left his apartment the next evening, the streets slick with melting snow and the faint tang of exhaust. He kept his pace measured, coat collar up, eyes scanning storefronts and intersections, notebook tucked securely under his arm. Crowley's presence lingered in his mind like a shadow, and Marcus knew the officer would be watching from somewhere. He approached the precinct cautiously, choosing a side street that gave him a line of sight without drawing attention. The flickering streetlight buzzed overhead, casting jagged reflections across the wet asphalt. Marcus paused, checking the notebook in his hand. No notes yet, just preparation. He wasn't here to confront. Not tonight. He was here to observe, to gather evidence, to document patterns. A black SUV rolled past slowly, tires splashing shallow puddles onto the curb. Marcus barely flinched. Crowley had access to every patrol car in the district. Following him had become a quiet, constant pressure. He had learned to read the subtle cues, the engine hums, the reflection in a shop window, the faint smell of coffee or gasoline drifting from a passing car. Marcus read. A voice called, clipped and too casual to be innocent. He froze. Crowley stepped from the shadow of a parked cruiser, badge glinting under the light, a thin smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Evening, officer, Marcus said evenly. Evening, Crowley replied. His tone carried a fake warmth that Marcus knew well. Fancy seeing you here. You watching the precinct again? Marcus's jaw tightened. I'm observing traffic patterns. Crowley laughed, a short, sharp bark. Right. Traffic patterns. Funny how your patterns always seem to include me. Huh? Marcus kept his voice neutral. I'm not targeting anyone. Crowley leaned closer, lowering his voice. Funny how people who don't target anyone still end up in trouble. A patrol car passed, but no one stopped to intervene. Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Crowley wasn't subtle. He was deliberate. Every microaggression, every smake, every coded comment was a way of testing boundaries, establishing dominance. You've been busy, haven't you? Marcus said, carefully, following complaints, gathering reports. Crowley's smirk faltered, just slightly. Careful, Marcus. You poke at the wrong hornet's nest. You might get stung. Marcus tilted his head, meeting the gaze without blinking. And you think you're the hornet? Crowley's smile returned, colder this time. I'm the entire hive. A gust of wind swirled between them, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and exhaust. Marcus felt the pressure of the night, the weight of the unseen eyes, the city that moved without noticing. Crowley tapped his badge. You know, I could run your name through the system. See if you've got a record. Make sure your little observations don't interfere with official business. Marcus exhaled slowly. I'm cleared. Fully authorized. Crowley laughed again, shaking his head. Authorized doesn't mean untouchable. Marcus noticed a glint of movement across the street, a security camera tracking the interaction. The memory of the night he was harassed before came back in sharp detail. He kept his expression calm, internalizing the tension, letting it build like a wire ready to snap. You're persistent, Crowley said finally. I'll give you that. But persistence is a way of getting people hurt. Marcus responded without hesitation. And cowardice is a way of getting people exposed. Crowley's eyes flickered, the first real hint of unease. He muttered something under his breath and stepped back, signaling into his radio. The sound crackled. Unit 4, keep an eye on. Nothing. Just a civilian. Marcus stayed where he was, silently counting seconds. He did not flinch, did not move, did not give Crowley the satisfaction of a reaction. The officer's final glance lingered for a heartbeat too long. Then he turned abruptly, disappearing into the fog of the city. Marcus let his shoulders relax, but only slightly. He had learned that these small victories were fragile, temporary, and often dangerous. Later, walking home, Marcus reflected on the day's interactions. Crowley had escalated. The stops, the shadowing, the thinly veiled threats. This was no longer about casual harassment. This was pressure, testing limits, trying to provoke a reaction. Marcus understood the game. Remain calm, document everything, and anticipate the moves before they happened. At home, he laid out the files on the table. Reports, complaints, screenshots of messages, notes from observations. He numbered incidents, highlighted patterns, traced timelines, every subtle harassment, every coded threat, every disappearance of reports. Crowley's network of control stretched far beyond the precinct, but Marcus had an advantage: clarity, precision, and a record that could not be erased. He paused at a note he'd written earlier that morning. Retaliation confirmed. Systemic support for abuse. Crowley escalating. Next steps: collect witness statements, verify patterns, document all interactions. A knock at the door startled him. He glanced at the clock. 2:03 a.m. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. Marcus exhaled, placing a hand on the notebook. The city outside hummed, indifferent. But tomorrow, and the day after, he would return. Watch, record, resist. The pressure would continue, but so would he, because someone had to see the pattern before the system swallowed it whole. The coffee shop smelled of burnt espresso and old newspapers, a comforting contrast to the tense hum of the city streets outside. Marcus Reed sat at a corner table, notebook open, laptop closed, waiting. Today, he wasn't observing officers. He was meeting civilians who had been on the receiving end of Crowley's harassment. First to arrive was Lionel Brooks, the school teacher whose complaint 3 years earlier had vanished into the department's archives. Brooks's hands trembled slightly as he set down his cup. I wasn't sure I should come," he said, voice low. "After what happened last time, people notice." Marcus nodded. "I understand. That's why we're doing this quietly. No names outside this room." Brooks glanced around nervously. "He followed me after school once. Asked why I was walking in my own neighborhood. Threatened to make it uncomfortable if I didn't answer questions he didn't have a right to ask." Marcus scribbled notes. Short phrases, precise facts, nothing emotional that couldn't be backed up. "Did you report it?" Marcus asked. Brooks exhaled sharply. "I tried. The complaint disappeared. Nothing happened. I was afraid. I still am." Marcus nodded. He had seen this fear before. The quiet compliance, the nervous energy, the constant calculation of risk versus justice. Crowley's pattern was consistent, and the system was complicit. Next arrived Janine Porter, a local business owner. Her cafe had been the site of one of Crowley's infamous stops. "He accused me of illegal activity in my own shop," she said. Her hand shook as she gestured toward the notebook. "I had customers, cameras everywhere. Still, the story changed when I reported it. No record. Nothing." Marcus took in her words, noting the details: time, date, location, witnesses present, officer behavior. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "All these incidents connect. I'm documenting patterns." Porter hesitated. People don't want to get involved. Some of my staff are scared. They say, why rock the boat? But we all know what happened." He met her gaze steadily. "Patterns matter more than individuals right now. Each report you provide strengthens a case. Without it," he continues. Silence fell between them, punctuated only by the clinking of spoons against ceramic cups. Outside, the city moved obliviously on. A third person arrived, a young man, shy, hesitant, his hoodie pulled low over his eyes. "I saw what he did to my neighbor," he mumbled. "Pulled him over, yelled at him for nothing. I took a video. Don't know if it's legal to give it to anyone." Marcus smiled faintly. "You're doing the right thing. That video could be crucial. No names beyond this room. I'll make sure it's protected." The three civilians exchanged uneasy glances. Fear was visible in their shoulders, the way their hands gripped cups or notebooks, the way they glanced toward the windows as if expecting Crowley to appear. Marcus made a mental note. Crowley's influence extended beyond direct harassment. It was systemic, a culture of intimidation, reinforced by silence. They spent the next hour recounting incidents, Marcus guiding the conversation, taking meticulous notes, asking clarifying questions without judgment. Each story reinforced a pattern he had already seen in official reports and his own observations. The harassment wasn't random. It was a methodical, ongoing abuse of power. At one point, Porter leaned forward, whispering, "Be careful. He knows who's talking." Marcus exhaled. "I know. That's why we're careful. We protect witnesses. We protect ourselves." Brooks shook his head. "But how?" His everywhere." Marcus tapped his notebook. "His visible, predictable. The pattern gives him away. And patterns are what we document. Evidence matters more than theory." The young man looked up. "You think this will stop him?" Marcus hesitated, letting the question hang. "It might," he said finally, "but stopping him isn't enough. The system has to see him for what he is. That's the goal." By the end of the meeting, Marcus had collected 3 full witness statements, videos, and personal accounts, all sensitive material now carefully secured. Each civilian left with a sense of relief, cautious but empowered, knowing that for the first time, someone was listening without judgment, someone who could navigate the system they feared. Marcus stayed behind, leaning over his notebook, recording impressions, the fear, the courage, the subtle signs of intimidation. Every gesture mattered, every hesitated word was evidence. He looked out the window. The city carried on, indifferent. But inside the coffee shop, stories accumulated, forming a quiet rebellion against the system's silence. Marcus closed the notebook, sliding it carefully into his bag. Tomorrow, the work would continue. More patterns, more observations, more steps toward exposing the truth. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet. Bystanders had spoken, and their voices were no longer invisible. The first light of dawn spilled weakly through Marcus's blinds, painting the walls of his apartment a pale gray. He didn't sleep. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. Every knock, every unfamiliar text, every car engine outside kept him alert. Crowley's retaliation had grown bolder, street surveillance, shadowing, anonymous warnings. But Marcus had more than fear now. He had evidence. He laid the witness statements across the table, Brooks's transcript, Porter's account, the young man's video. Alongside them, Marcus placed the historical complaints, the archived copies, the vanished reports. Each piece was a thread in a pattern too clear to ignore. Crowley's behavior was an anomaly. It was systemic. Marcus drafted a new plan. He would bypass the precinct entirely, bypass compromised internal channels. He contacted a trusted civilian oversight board and their legal counsel. Emails flew back and forth, each carefully worded to avoid triggering retaliation while ensuring that evidence remained secure. Marcus attached encrypted files, video clips, timestamps, and his own observational notes. "Do you understand the risk?" the attorney asked in a secure video call. His face was pale, the kind of cautious expression Marcus had grown to respect. "I do," Marcus replied. "And I've accounted for it. I'm prepared for Crowley to escalate. But this is to reach someone outside the precinct. Someone impartial." The attorney nodded. "Good. We'll review everything and prepare to bring it to media if necessary. Legally. Carefully." Marcus exhaled. For the first time, he felt a flicker of momentum. That evening, Crowley appeared again, not in full uniform, but clearly on patrol, making his presence known. He spotted Marcus across the street, eyes narrowing, lips curling into a smirk. Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he raised a single hand in acknowledgement, letting Crowley see that observation was not fair. The officer's reaction was instantaneous. He barked orders into his radio, likely reporting Marcus as a suspicious figure. But Marcus had anticipated this. The entire interaction was recorded on multiple personal devices, cameras, dash cams, even a passerby's smartphone he had secured permission to use. Each minute was documented. Inside, Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction tempered with unease. Crowley was predictable. The pattern had emerged, and patterns, when exposed, were unstoppable. By nightfall, Marcus received confirmation. The oversight board had reviewed the files. They were impressed by the thorough documentation and corroborated evidence. They agreed to escalate. A formal complaint was filed with copies sent to the city council and a local investigative journalist known for covering police misconduct. The journalist called him late, voice low but urgent. "Marcus, this is bigger than one officer. Entire precinct culture. You've got the proof, but you need to be careful. They'll try to intimidate you." "I understand," Marcus said. "They already are." Over the next few days, media interest grew quietly but deliberately. Anonymous briefings hinted at systemic corruption. Crowley, unaware that he was under scrutiny from multiple angles, began behaving erratically. Traffic stops became more frequent. Unnecessary confrontations escalated. An internal memo suggested dissatisfaction with oversight reviews. Marcus observed from a distance, recording every instance. He noticed a subtle shift among precinct staff, hesitation in their usual casual arrogance, furtive glances, whispered conversations stopped when he passed by. The ripple effect of exposure had begun. Crowley's network of intimidation, carefully cultivated over years, was showing cracks. One afternoon, Marcus met again with Brooks, Porter, and the young man in the coffee shop. He showed them snippets of evidence without revealing sensitive identities, timestamps, emails, screenshots. Their faces reflected relief, disbelief, and cautious hope. For the first time, they understood their experiences were part of a larger truth. "Do you think this will make a difference?" Brooks asked quietly. "It has to," Marcus said. "We've created a record they can't erase. Patterns don't lie. Evidence doesn't forget." That night, Marcus returned to his apartment and reviewed Crowley's past actions one last time. Internal communications, inconsistencies in reporting, witness accounts, all compiled into a single, airtight narrative. He leaned back, exhausted, but resolute. The city outside continued unaware, indifferent to the work being done behind closed doors. But soon, it would have to notice. Crowley's power was built on invisibility and silence. Marcus was about to shatter both. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he typed a secure message to the oversight board. Crowley escalating. Documentation complete. Request immediate review. Witnesses secured. He set the phone down, fingers brushing the notebook. Patterns had been exposed. The city, the system, and the public were about to see them. And for the first time, Marcus allowed himself the faintest flicker of hope. The hearing room smelled of polished wood and antiseptic. Marcus Reed entered with quiet confidence, his notebook tucked under his arm, his laptop bag at his side. Rows of chairs were filled with members of the oversight board, legal representatives, journalists, and a scattering of precinct officials, including Daniel Crowley, sitting stiffly with a forced smile. Marcus took his seat at the front, the weight of weeks pressing on his shoulders. Every report, every witness statement, every erased complaint had led to this moment. He was here not as a bystander, but as the observer who had seen the pattern, documented the evidence, and refused to remain silent. The hearing began with formalities, but Marcus's attention stayed on Crowley. The officer's smirk faltered slightly as the board chair introduced Marcus's findings. Slides flickered on the screen, time-stamped videos, emails, internal reports, witness statements. "Mr. Reed," the chair said, voice measured, "please present your findings." Marcus nodded. He opened his laptop and began systematically laying out the timeline. "This case is not about a single incident," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "It is about a pattern of harassment and abuse of power. Officer Crowley has consistently used intimidation, coded threats, and procedural manipulation to target civilians and internal observers alike. 6 complaints over 8 years, multiple erased or ignored reports, retaliatory contact within hours of observations." He paused, letting the gravity of the words settle. Crowley shifted in his seat, jaw tight, fingers tapping nervously on the table. Marcus continued. "I have corroborated each complaint with witness statements, video evidence, and internal communications. The pattern is clear. This is systemic, not isolated, and it is ongoing." A reporter leaned forward, scribbling notes. Crowley's eyes darted around the room, trying to gauge reactions. For once, no one laughed at him. No one dismissed his behavior. The power he had wielded for years felt suddenly fragile, exposed under scrutiny. "Do you have any questions for Mr. Reed?" the chair asked. Crowley stood abruptly, voice rising. "This is harassment. These claims are fabricated. I've served the city with honor." Marcus held his gaze steady. "The evidence speaks for itself. Your personal feelings do not erase facts." The room grew tense. Crowley's colleagues shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered to each other, glances darting toward the screens displaying video clips of stops, confrontations, and internal emails showing acknowledgement of complaints that were ignored or suppressed. Crowley slammed his hand on the table. "You can't prove intent." Marcus opened the folder, setting it on the table. Intent is demonstrated in patterns. Systemic abuse is not about a single act. It is about repeated behavior and its consequences. The victim's accounts, corroborated by timestamps and recordings, make the pattern undeniable. The chair nodded toward the board. "We will review all submitted evidence. Officer Crowley, your conduct is under full scrutiny, and the documentation provided will be considered in disciplinary actions. Mr. Reed, thank you for your thorough investigation." Crowley sank back into his chair, face pale. The smirk was gone, replaced with the first real look of fear Marcus had ever seen on him. The patterns, once invisible or ignored, had now become undeniable. After the formal hearing concluded, journalists surrounded Marcus outside the building. He answered only a few questions, careful not to reveal sensitive details or compromise witness protection. Each step, each sentence, was deliberate. The narrative of abuse, once silent, was now public. Crowley, meanwhile, left in silence, flanked by attorneys. His confidence had eroded, replaced with uncertainty. Every interaction, every decision, every act of intimidation was now documented and verified. The system he relied on to protect him had begun to turn against him. Later, Marcus sat in his apartment, reviewing notes from the hearing. He felt no triumph, only exhaustion and resolve. Crowley's exposure was a victory, but the toll of weeks spent under pressure, documenting harassment, and facing potential retaliation weighed heavily. Marcus reflected on the civilians he had met, the courage it took for them to speak, and the delicate balance required to protect their safety while seeking justice. He opened his notebook, rereading the margin notes. Systemic harassment documented. Witness protection ensured. Pattern undeniable. For the first time, Marcus allowed himself a sense of closure for the work that had led to this point, but not complete relief. Justice was only just beginning. The ripple effects would continue, both for Crowley and the institution that had enabled him. Outside, the city carried on, indifferent. But inside, a single, undeniable truth had been established. The system could be held accountable, and patterns of abuse, once exposed, could no longer hide. Marcus closed his notebook. Tomorrow, Crowley would face consequences. But tonight, Marcus allowed himself the quiet knowledge that meticulous observation, courage, and unflinching documentation had made a difference. The city was awake, the morning sun glinting off wet streets and glass towers, but inside Marcus Reed's apartment, the world felt suspended. Crowley's termination had been announced quietly, legal charges pending, reforms under discussion. The precinct, one a fortress of silence and intimidation, now felt exposed, awkward, fragile. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes tracing the lines of his notebook one last time. Every observation, every erased report, every witness account, all had coalesced into proof that Crowley's pattern of harassment was undeniable. The officer's network of fear had unraveled, replaced by documentation, exposure, and accountability. Yet Marcus felt no triumph, only the lingering fatigue of weeks under pressure, the stress of constant vigilance, the heavy knowledge of what could have happened if he had faltered. Justice had been served, but at a cost. He had faced threats, intimidation, and the constant threat of retaliation. His nights had been sleepless. His body carried tension that would not leave easily. He sipped his coffee, black and strong, and glanced at the city through the window. People moved unaware below, their lives untouched by the battles waged quietly in the halls of power. Yet the ripple had begun. Policies were changing. Oversight boards were empowered. Crowley's colleagues had been forced to reckon with their complicity, their silence, and their inaction. A text buzzed on his phone. Supervisor Alvarez. You did good, Marcus. The system sees it now. Marcus stared at it, fingers hovering over the keys. Yes, but at what cost? He muttered. He thought of Brooks, Porter, the young man, each of them carrying their own trauma from encounters with Crowley. He thought of himself, hollowed out in the process, yet necessary for the work to succeed. He set the phone down and opened the notebook, flipping through pages of meticulous notes, each a small victory against a pattern of abuse. Every line reminded him of the work that still needed to be done. Systems to be reformed, officers held accountable, but vigilance was never-ending. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, cars honked, the city continued. Marcus allowed himself a deep exhale. He had resisted intimidation, documented injustice, and preserved the voices of those silenced. Crowley would face the consequences of his actions, and the department would be forced to acknowledge patterns it had long ignored. But Marcus also knew the emotional toll would linger. He would carry memories of fear, tension, and confrontation long after the public celebration of accountability faded. Justice was necessary, but it was never free. He picked up the phone and sent a secure message to the oversight board. All witness statements filed. All documentation complete. Recommend follow-up monitoring for compliance. Then he returned to the window, watching the city move on without him. The sun had broken through the clouds, illuminating streets that had been darkened by fear and silence. Marcus let himself imagine a future in which observation, persistence, and courage could tip the balance toward fairness. And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a quiet smile. Not victory, not relief. Those would come later, but a recognition that one person's commitment to truth could expose even the most entrenched abuses of power. Marcus Reed had stood still. He had observed. He had resisted. And through meticulous courage, he had ensured that systemic harassment, once invisible, could no longer hide. The city continued below, indifferent, but now it was accountable.